All right, so we're diving into a case that a lot of you have asked about, and it's a tough one to talk about. The Delphi murders. It's the kind of story that just grabs you and doesn't let go. Two young girls just out for a walk. And, well, it all starts in February 2017 in Delphi, Indiana. We've got Libby German and Abby Williams, 14 and 13 years old, best friends. They disappear while hiking.
On this trail that seems, totally normal.
Right, the Moon and High Bridge. It's a converted railway line turned into this scenic hiking spot.
A place you'd think would be safe, especially in a small town like Delphi, and I think that's part of what made this case so unsettling for so many people.
Absolutely. It's that feeling that it could happen anywhere, even in a place that feels familiar and safe.
In this case, it really got to people, I think, because of Libby, what she did even while she was in that terrifying situation. She somehow managed to start recording on her phone.
You're right. It's almost unbelievable to think about, facing something so scary. And her instinct is to hit record. And that audio and video, it became this crucial piece of evidence. It's almost like we got a glimpse into those last moments. But before we get to that, I want to step back for a second. Who were Libby and Abby? They were more than just victims in a case.
Exactly. They were just normal kids, young girls who loved being outdoors. They were always taking pictures, making videos, documenting their lives, like so many teenagers do.
Living their lives, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Moon and High Bridge Trail, it was a place they knew well. I mean, it's picturesque, it's a popular spot, it's right there in their town. You just wouldn't expect something horrific to happen there.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's that shattering of expectations. 1 minute you're enjoying a hike with your best friend, and then
everything changes. As the day went on, and they didn't come home, I can only imagine the fear that must have set in for their families.
And for the entire community, too.
Right. Hundreds of people from Delphi and the surrounding areas joined the search, which I guess shows how tight-knit that community is.
It really does. It's one of those towns where everyone knows everyone. So this crime, it wasn't just some abstract event on the news, It hit them at their core.
It violated their sense of security in a way that's hard to imagine.
And then, of course, the discovery of their bodies, it just shattered that sense of safety completely.
It's hard to even fathom what that moment must have been like for everyone involved. But amidst all of this horror and grief, there's that one thing that kept the case alive in everyone's minds, even years later.
The stone.
That's right. And it actually played a big part in finally cracking the case wide open. But we'll get into all that later.
It all comes back to Libby's quick thinking in those terrifying moments. She managed to start recording.
Like you said, incredible presence of mind in that situation.
In the video, you can see a man, he became known as Bridge Guy, walking towards the girls. You can't see his whole face. He's got a hood on, a hat. But it's still chilling to see.
It's chilling. It's like something out of a nightmare. And then you have the audio, too. This voice. It just sends chills down your spine.
Guys, down the hill. Just 3 words. But they were enough to terrify investigators, terrify the public. And for years, it became the symbol of the case, this voice that haunted the investigation.
So even with the video, the audio, the nationwide attention, years pass, and there are no real leads. Why was it so difficult to find Bridge Guy? I mean, if they had his image, his voice?
Well, you have to remember, forensic investigation, it's incredibly complex. It's not like what you see on TV, where they can instantly identify someone from a blurry security camera shot.
Right.
His face was partially obscured in the video, and voice recognition technology back then wasn't as advanced as it is now. Wasn't a simple match.
Okay, so that makes sense. But still, imagine the frustration. Having a piece of the puzzle, a direct link to whoever did this, but not being able to solve it.
It's agonizing. And think about the families, knowing that the person who killed their daughters could be living among them, going about their day, while the case remained unsolved. It's a heavy burden to carry.
The town became synonymous with this unsolved mystery. Years of speculation, hundreds of tips, dead ends.
And then seemingly out of nowhere.
2022, everything changes. Richard Allen, a local man, gets arrested. What was that like for Delphi?
Oh, it was shock, to say the least. Complete disbelief. I mean, Richard Allen was, on the surface, an ordinary guy. Worked at the CVS, the pharmacy. People knew him, saw him around town. It's not like he was some mysterious outsider.
And suddenly he's the prime suspect in this horrific double homicide.
It was a twist that nobody saw coming. I mean, here's this unassuming guy, someone you might see at the pharmacy, exchange a few words with, and all this time...
He was the one they were looking for.
Exactly. It really is like something you'd see in a movie or a TV show, you think you know someone, and then bam, this huge secret comes out.
It makes you wonder who you can really trust, right?
Mm.
But let's get back to the investigation. How did they finally connect Alan to the murders? What was that missing piece of the puzzle?
Well, there was this one piece of evidence that turned out to be crucial. A single unspent bullet, a .40 caliber, found right there at the crime scene between the bodies of Libby and Abby. And get this, through some pretty incredible forensic analysis, they were able to link that bullet back to a gun owned by, you guessed it, Richard Allen.
Wait, hold on. They could actually link the bullet to his gun. That seems so technical. How does that even work?
It's all about ballistics, you see. Every firearm, it leaves these unique markings on the bullets it fires, kind of like a fingerprint.
Oh, interesting. So each gun has its own, signature.
Exactly. So when they examined that bullet under a microscope, they were able to match those markings to the gun registered to Richard Allen. It's pretty hard to argue with that kind of scientific evidence.
It sounds pretty ironclad. But I'm guessing his defense team still tried to poke holes in it, right? I mean, that's their job.
Oh, absolutely. They questioned everything. The chain of custody, suggesting maybe the bullet wasn't handled properly or that there could have been contamination at the crime scene, trying to create that element of doubt.
Passing doubt on the process, yeah.
But the prosecution, they had their ducks in a row. They meticulously documented every step from the moment that bullet was found to its analysis in the lab. There was no room for error.
So that's the physical evidence. But you mentioned earlier that Alan actually confessed to the murders multiple times. Is that right?
That's right. While he was in custody, he allegedly confessed to prison staff and even to members of his own family.
Wow. To his own family.
And here's the thing. A lot of these confessions, they were recorded.
Recorded confessions, that's got to be tough to argue against in court.
It's pretty damning evidence. But of course, the defense team, they had to try something. They tried to argue that the confessions were coerced, that Alan was pressured into saying things he didn't mean.
I see.
Or that his mental state at the time, made him susceptible to suggestion. Maybe he was just saying what he thought people wanted to hear. Remember, they were building a defense strategy around Alan's mental health, suggesting he wasn't in control of his actions.
So they're trying to cast doubt on his state of mind and the reliability of his confessions. But how do you actually prove in court that someone is mentally unfit to stand trial?
It's not easy. It's called an insanity defense, and it's very rarely successful.
Right, I've heard of that.
The defense had to prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that Alan's mental state prevented him from understanding that what he was doing was wrong. That's a high bar to clear.
So what did they do? What kind of evidence did they present?
They brought in expert witnesses, psychologists, and psychiatrists, the whole shebang. They testified about his mental health history, hoping to show a pattern of instability or impairment. They were trying to paint a picture of someone who wasn't in control of his actions, someone who might not even remember what happened that day.
So it became a battle of the experts then. What did the prosecution have to say about all this?
Well, they countered with their own experts, who argued that even if Alan had some mental health issues, it didn't necessarily mean he was incapable of understanding that killing 2 young girls was wrong.
Right.
They emphasized his actions, the planning, the attempts to cover his tracks. They said it all pointed to someone who knew exactly what they were doing.
And then there were the confessions to his own family. That just seemed so powerful,
Yeah.
Did the defense address those at all?
Oh, they had to. They argued that family dynamics can be complicated, that maybe out of some sense of loyalty or desperation, he said things that weren't true. Maybe he felt pressured to take the blame to protect someone else, or maybe he was so unstable that he actually believed he was guilty, even if he wasn't.
So it was this back and forth, this legal tug of war. On one side, you have the prosecution, with the bullet, the confessions, arguing premeditation. And on the other side, the defense, trying to raise doubts about the evidence and Alan's mental state. It must have been a really intense trial.
Oh, the atmosphere in that courtroom was electric. The families of the victims were there. Their grief was just palpable, the weight of their loss, it just hung over everything.
I can only imagine.
And the media, the entire community, everyone was watching, waiting to see if justice would be served.
Years of waiting, and it all comes down to that jury's decision.
Yeah.
What was the feeling in the room as they waited for the verdict?
You could have cut the tension with a knife, honestly. It was palpable. After 4 long days of deliberation, the jury filed back in, and the verdict was read.
And what was the verdict?
Guilty, on all counts.
Yeah.
The jury found Richard Allen guilty of the murders of Libby German and Abby Williams.
Wow. A unanimous decision.
Unanimous. It seemed like they had really carefully considered all the evidence, the expert testimony, and in the end, they just found the prosecution's case more convincing. They believed that Richard Allen, despite everything his defense team argued, was responsible for this horrific crime.
So what was the reaction in the courtroom? After all that time, all that waiting?
Relief, I think, for a lot of people. There were tears, hugs, a sense of closure for a community that had been holding its breath for so long. But it was a bittersweet victory, relief mixed with the crushing sadness that nothing could bring Libby and Abby back.
Justice is complicated. It can bring a sense of peace, but it can't erase the pain of loss. And in this case, the loss is just immeasurable.
It really is. 2 young lives cut short, a family and a whole community forever changed. But the verdict, at the very least, it meant that Richard Allen would be held accountable for his actions.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine what that moment must have been like for everyone. Years of waiting, wondering if they'd ever get answers, hoping for justice. And then finally, there's some resolution. But it doesn't bring them back.
No, it doesn't. There's no going back, no undoing what happened. But at least there was accountability. Richard Allen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Wow. Life without parole. That's the harshest sentence possible, right?
It is, and it reflects the gravity of his crimes. He'll never be able to harm anyone else.
That brings some comfort, I guess. But even with the trial being over, the sentence handed down, the story of the Delphi murders, it continues to echo, doesn't it?
It does. Delphi will always be linked to this case. And while the community has shown incredible resilience, there's no doubt that it left a scar. It changed how people lived their lives, how they saw their own town.
Yeah, I can only imagine. There's like this loss of innocence, Suddenly you're aware of the darkness that can exist, even in places you thought were safe.
I remember reading an interview with someone who lived in Delphi. They said, "We used to leave our doors unlocked.
Really?
Now we double-check every lock, every window." That really captures the shift that happened.
It's a reminder that even in small towns, these horrific things can happen. Evil can find its way in. But in this case, the community didn't just shut down. They didn't give in to the fear.
No, they fought back.
They kept the pressure on, never let the case go cold. All those vigils, sharing tips, raising awareness.
It speaks volumes about the importance of community involvement in investigations. All those voices, all those efforts demanding justice. They made a difference.
It's a good reminder that we're not powerless.
Yeah.
We can come together, support each other, and demand answers, even when it feels hopeless.
Yeah.
And, we can't forget about Libby's role in all of this.
Her quick thinking.
Yes, recording that video, even while facing that.
Yeah.
Unimaginable terror. It's a chilling reminder, though, that we live in a world where we're constantly documenting our lives, even our most vulnerable moments.
It is a double-edged sword, technology.
For sure.
In this case, it was crucial in identifying Richard Allen, but it makes you think, doesn't it?
About the potential for misuse.
Yeah, the privacy concerns, the questions about surveillance, it's a whole other conversation.
Definitely something to think about. But in the case of the Delphi murders, at least, technology was a force for good.
It helped bring a killer to justice.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what stands out to you the most about this case? What are the most important things to remember?
It always comes back to Libby and Abby for me. 2 young lives cut tragically short. We have to remember them and their families and the impact this loss had on everyone who knew them.
I agree. It's a powerful reminder to cherish every moment, to advocate for safety and to be aware, but also to never give up hope, even when faced with the darkest of situations.
And we can't forget about the Delphi community, their strength, their resilience, their unwavering pursuit of justice. That's something to be inspired by.
This case, it's tough to revisit, but it teaches us about the importance of community, the power of technology, and that the pursuit of justice, it can be a long road. But sometimes, even after years, the truth comes to light. Libby and Abby's story, it will stay with us, a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, the human spirit can endure and hope can prevail. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.